Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dan Hurley. I am been asked to be the moderator. A couple of things. Probably the most important thing, I am a resident of Springfield Township, and I also have a long association with Channel 12, and as the moderator of the Local 12 Newsmaker show on Sunday morning. Spend a lot of time talking about issues. So hopefully tonight, that's what we can do. Really grapple with the issues that are involved here and do it in a way that gets us to understand what the issues are and sort of move things forward. Just to give you a sense of what the flow of the meeting is going to be, there's going to be a couple of the trustees who will want to make comments to get us started. Then we will have a little background on the history of the site and the planning process that has led us to the point where the discussions about what should happen at Warder, sort of the context of those discussions. If you'll remember, I'm sure many of you were involved in that planning process about 2011. I know I was, as moderator of 4 or 5 of the public meetings, including the one here in Finneytown. We will then introduce the St. Francis group, which are, they are the developers that are in the early stages of trying to put together a plan. And then there will be the presentation of the preliminary design concepts. These are, those of you who know about design, you know that when you're working with this sort of thing, there are very early sort of concept ideas and drawings that set parameters, but not down to the level of specifics about what it's actually going to necessarily end up looking like. There can be a lot of changes along the way. And then after all of that, we have sort of we all can share a common grounding in the background that led us to this point. Then we're going to have plenty of time for people to engage in questions to anybody who happens to be on the panel or who has spoken already, or just to raise questions, thoughts, contribute ideas to this process as it moves forward. So that's the essential flow. The idea is that we will be out of here about 8:45, no later than 9 o'clock, because I fall asleep at that point. So let me begin by introducing some of the people at the front table, and I'm sure you know many of them. Gwen McFarland is a trustee. Joe Hunterlaw, who is also a trustee. Mark Burning, who is a trustee as well. I said three trustees in the township. And then Dan Burning, who is the fiscal officer, also an elected official in Ohio's structure of government. Mike Hinnekamp, over against the wall. Mike is the township administrator. And then Chris Gilbert is, over there, assistant township administrator and development services director. So those are the people, and then we're going to be hearing from the developers, the St. Francis group, as we move forward. So if we can get started, I think Joe and Gwen, you wanted to make a few comments, right?
Thanks, Dan. First of all, I just want to say how I am so happy to see so many people here this evening. And from my perspective, the audience today, there's been a lot of rumors, and at least we can not let the rumors eat us up, which is what a friend of mine said not too long ago, but we can be able to look at and dispel the rumors and get some of the facts. It's important that that is clarified tonight. We have had, this is nothing new, you're not going to hear new news, but if you haven't heard it before, you'll hear it tonight. The thing that's important when we talk about rumors, and some of you have heard me say this before in some of our meetings when we've talked about Warder, is that it's critical. First of all, there were rumors that we were going to make Warder a place for Section 8 housing, and I don't want to offend anyone in here. It's not that I don't support it, but I think we have enough in Springfield Township, and that was never the plan in the first place. And the other thing was to look at, it's not going to be another Brentwood, because there were some rumors floating around about that. And if you guys recall, in my last township meeting, I said the best way to dispel rumors is to tell on it rather than let it fester and eat us up. Okay, so I'm glad to see you here tonight. And then the other thing I'm going to request, and those of you who have listened or been attentive in some of our township meetings, when it comes time for citizen participation, these are the things I ask for the audience. Ask from you. Please respect each person that comes to the podium. Please do not disrespect anyone by talking or having a general conversation, because when you do that, then we cannot hear what the individuals are saying. So it's important that we respect each other so that we can conduct ourselves in a productive manner and in a positive manner, because that's one of the, from my perspective, as long as I've lived in Springfield Township, that's always been one of our assets and our attributes, is that we respect each other. And that's one of our values as well. It's a critical value. So I'm just asking for those, when you look at your agenda and it says conduct and public comments. So I'm going to turn the microphone now over to Mr. Hunterlaw, and you're going to say a few words. Is that correct?
Just very briefly, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the purpose of this meeting. We want to get out as much of the facts as we can as to what the history of this has been. You know, it's been probably 17, 18 years ago that the Smale Commission came up with a finding that they wanted to sell Warder. Warder was owned by the city of Cincinnati. At that time, I was on the board, so was Gwen, so was Tom Bryan, and we decided we did not, looking at what zoning was, we did not want it to turn into a Section 8 project. We wanted to have more control over it for the entire community. That's why the township acquired Warder in the first place, so that we could. It's a beautiful piece of property. We want to develop it in a way that is going to be good for the entire community. We look at this development as actually being a way to develop it in many respects as a park. So I want you to think about that as we're going through this. I will tell you, you know, I've had some people, that come to me and I see some of the shirts and stuff, and people said, we don't want it to be developed as anything. We want it to stay exactly as it has been. The problem, we have approximately $1.2 million invested in the entire project at this time. As trustees, we have a duty to everyone in Springfield Township, all 36,000 people. And so we can't do just what somebody on a couple of streets or a certain neighborhood wants. We have to do what's in the best interest of everyone. We're looking for a development that's going to raise property values, be compatible with the beautiful area that it is, and be a catalytic development that will help move our township forward. So I ask you, everyone, please listen to this. I don't think the meeting tonight is about, are we going to build something there? Are we not going to? We went through that process, probably started at least 6 years ago. And we went through a comprehensive neighborhood master plan where we had groups of citizens from all over the township. At the end of that, they recommended that we do develop the project. We've been working on it very thoughtfully since. In the end, whether Warder ever has anything built or not will depend in large part on the market. Is there a market for development there? If there's not one, these developers here will tell us that, and it'll stay as it is. If there is a market, then we have to look at what are those uses. Are those ones that would be compatible with people who live in the area? Would they be good for the township as a whole? If they come to us with some uses which we say, no, we don't want that in our township, then we wouldn't go that way. But we have to look at that. and I think you need to look at all the other communities, in not only in Hamilton County, but in Butler County and other places where they've been able to implement development into their communities very successfully. And in the end, I think we're looking at something that will be good. I know change is always something that's a little unsettling, but I think we should listen to the whole process tonight, and I ask you to keep your minds open until you've heard everything. Thank you for coming. And with that, I'm going to introduce Mike Hennenkamp, our Township Administrator.
Thanks, Joe. Good evening, everybody. I know we've got as Gwen said, we've got a great crowd here, a large crowd, and I know everybody's sort of chomping on the bit, wanting to get to the point where you can give some feedback, and we understand it's difficult to sit through a long presentation. Some of you are pretty familiar with what this process is. Some of you may be here for the first time, so I beg your indulgence as we go through this process. We want to give you a little background, sort of what the township's history of the site is, and this is kind of a summary of what I'm going to try very quickly to go through as to why did the township buy this property, why did we initially start out with a park plan is the initial development process. Why was the park plan not built? Why didn't we build a park? And why did we move from a park plan to a park plan and mixed use? And then how why additional parcels were added. So I want to go through that process here fairly quickly. The township originally got involved in this property back in April 1997 when actually I was contacted by some members of the Finneytown School District. Actually, it was Don Schmidt. He was involved with some individuals who were active in the Finneytown Civic Association at that time, and also the Finneytown Athletic Association. And they were very concerned because, as Mr. Honorlaw mentioned, the Smale Commission had mentioned or had actually recommended selling the property. And they were concerned that the city of Cincinnati was going to sell this property to a developer, and a development that the township would not want would take place on this site. There was a development not too far from here that had sort of stuck in most people's mind, and there was a lot of concern during that time that was going to happen. So the township got involved. In the initial stages, we began a series of discussions with the city of Cincinnati to find out if in fact that was true. Were they interested in selling the property? And over a long period of about 2 years, we finally wrapped up acquisition of the site. The site was about 42 acres that the township purchased. The city retained just about 10 acres of the site that they continue to own today. That's where the greenhouses and some of the structures remain located. And this property was acquired, as I said, back in October of 1999. There were some restrictions on the property as part of the purchase. It was to remain either as it is or as a park with no buildings built on it for at least a 10-year period other than recreational buildings, and that the township was required to complete a park plan, a master plan for the site. The city also wanted the township to construct an access road to the remaining 10-acre parcel, which was to be done at a certain time agreed mutually by both parties. After the township acquired it, we went through a public process and got some resident feedback. We hired a planning consultant and did some initial feelers as to what might the community what would they like to see for this property, and what would the township looking at. That very quickly led us to the concept that we're getting a lot of feedback from our recreation community or associations or recreation associations who had need for more active recreation. So we went through a very long process beginning in 2001. We hired two firms. CDS was an architectural and engineering firm. Human Nature is a park and design firm, landscape architects. And we went through about a 2-year process with this group and had 3 sort of major public hearings. Very similar to this one, maybe not quite this big, but had great turnout, great feedback in this process. And at the end of that process, there was a master plan developed where the property was going to be developed into a park. Some of it very active park with skate park for teenagers, some of it passive. There was an amphitheater. There were a lot of different features in the park, trails, those types of things. And that master plan, as I said, was adopted in February of 2003. This park, we went through a process in trying to figure out how we were going to fund building such a very beautiful master plan. And initially, we were faced with this was back in roughly 2003. We ran some numbers, and it was about a $12 million park. So in other words, to build this park would cost about $12 million. The difficulty with this is most of you know, if you know anything about development, most of it has to all happen at once. And you say, well, it could have been phased, but when you're doing earth moving, you're not going to phase earth moving. That's something that has to be done in clearing and those types of things. So it was sort of a $12 million hit, mostly up front. This didn't include the maintenance cost for the township to maintain this park. And so over a period of, roughly 2003, 2007, we went through this evolution of realizing we probably weren't going to be able to do this. Certainly, we weren't going to be able to do this on our own. We went and attempted to get both state funding, federal funding. We had a lot of very creative ideas of how we could turn this property into not only recreational, but also educational, regarding some stormwater things that were happening. At the end of the day, we were unsuccessful in all of our attempts. This was also about the same time we were seeing the landscape really change, not only nationally and globally, but also in our state, where the financial landscape, we were going through some very difficult financial times, as I mentioned, globally, nationally, statewide, but then we also started hearing some things from our state legislature about some changes that they were going to make. So it was becoming more and more improbable that we were going to be able to develop this park and be able to afford to do so for any period that we could see into our future. We also started seeing some changing feedback from our community. We had a lot of residents who had been here for many, many years saying they were looking to move up. They were looking for a different type. They wanted to sell their house. Their kids had moved away. They wanted to stay in the township. They were looking for a more upscale, what I would call attached product. They didn't want the house, whether that be a condo or some type of a patio home, something like that. And there really wasn't anything in the township available. So we began to hear some of that feedback at that time. We went kind of from the park idea to maybe a park in more of a mixed-use plan that would include some residential during this period of about 2007 to 2011. The township conducted two studies. There was a retail study to how we could upgrade the retail along primarily the Winton Road corridor, but really throughout the township on our various corridors, Hamilton Avenue corridor, also our Vine Street corridor as well. We also conducted a housing study to look at where some of those things we were hearing from the community about wanting a different housing type. Was that true? And both of those things sort of bared out very much. We engaged a firm called Property Advisors to assist us with those studies. And they also, Property Advisors, we went with a delegation from the city of Cincinnati down to Nashville, and we saw a project down there called Lenox Village. And that developer, long story short, became very interested in the Warder site and came up and made several visits. And we were very close in about 2008, 2009, of signing an agreement with that developer to do something similar to what he had done in Nashville. And that's about when the housing market really changed. This was also about the time that the township was embarking on a very, very thorough process called our Comprehensive Neighborhood Master Plan. And that's really sort of where we went today. Since that time, there are two additional parcels. Back in 2008, the township acquired about 9 acres property that was at 702 North Bend Road. This property was owned by First Pentecostal Church. Previous to that, for some of you folks that are in that area, it was the Stocker property, if that's more familiar to you. That property became available. It was offered to us. It was contiguous to Warder. We were thinking about either developing or doing something, some type of development, and the board at that time felt it was advantageous to acquire that property because of its location. More recently, in 2015, about 3 acres Again, for the folks that live in this area, the Bovee property was offered to us. That was up for sale, and the township acquired that. So all told now, the township has roughly about 54 acres on this site that we control that is contiguous. The comprehensive neighborhood master plan was very unusual in two regards. One is it not only is it a sort of land use plan that makes a lot of land use recommendations, but it also had a whole series of operational and service delivery components. We're not going to talk about that phase, but it was a very involved process. The trustees conducted over a 2-year period 12 separate unique neighborhood meetings where we went out and had meetings similar to this one in each of our, what we identified is our sort of 12 different areas of the township. So rather than have them just at one location, we actually had them out into the neighborhood. And we got a lot of feedback, and you're going to see a video about that explains that here in just a minute. Following that process, there was a 70-member planning committee, and the video will lead it through that. So I'm going to play that, and again, as part of this, I know no one wants to sit here and watch the video's about 6 minutes. It gives you the background of how we got here tonight. I can't tell you how many phone calls that I've fielded in the last month and how many conversations Dave and I have had. And he said, nobody knew about this. I don't know how to answer that, because what you're going to see on this video are meetings like this, with meetings, this room actually packed. Dan was a part of that process. This was a 2-year process. So I understand when people say we don't know, but I'm not sure, you know, how much more planning and how much effort that went in to this particular issue.
What makes Springfield Township unique? What makes Springfield Township a great place to live? Why do residents want to stay? What will bring new residents and businesses? Our history is rich, and on the horizon, our future is promising. Plans, carefully created, are the building blocks of the future. Springfield Township began in 2007 with a new vision, the 2020 Vision Plan, which deals with a set of action steps for township services and governance, collaborative actions, economic development, neighborhood enhancements, and recreational and cultural enrichment. Through a series of generalized goals and action statements, the Vision Plan outlines the needs, wants, and aspirations of those who make their living and raise their families here in Springfield Township. And it has become the roadmap to the future. Over the past 4 years, the ideas expressed in the Vision Plan have moved the township on the path to progress with multiple collaborations, cost containment practices, and new funding sources for capital projects. It has led the trustees to employ the gas and electric aggregation programs, which are saving residents and small business owners on their utility bills. Progress continues. A key step recommended in the neighborhood enhancement portion of the Vision Plan is the completion of a more detailed township master plan. This plan centers on the physical environment, land use, and zoning for each neighborhood, as well as the operational, service delivery, and financial stability of the township. The plan addresses Springfield Township as a community of neighborhoods, and no one-size-fits-all approach could ever be appropriate for a community so large and diverse. Additionally, this plan is designed to meet the needs and concerns of today's residents to enable our community to flourish and to attract new residents and businesses for tomorrow. To create the plan, the township was divided into 12 districts, defined in part by their geographic location, school boundaries, and similarities in housing. In the summer of 2009, township residents were invited to attend one of 11 neighborhood input meetings. The meetings provided current data and sought resident feedback about what they would like to see in the future. Each meeting began with a presentation of current neighborhood conditions, providing residents with statistical information relating to where they live and how their area compared to the township as a whole and to surrounding communities. Formal surveys and open discussions were used to gather citizen input. Opinions regarding the strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities present in each neighborhood were expressed. Nearly 500 residents attended these meetings, and upon completion, concerns common to all neighborhoods were compiled and serve as a major focus in the final master plan. The next step involved the creation of neighborhood steering committees to work with township staff in order to develop plans to capitalize on neighborhood attributes, to explore various opportunities, and develop solutions to the most common concerns. The trustees invited 70 residents representing all neighborhoods to review the plan recommendations and provide valuable input. Neighborhood steering committees met during an 8-month period, starting in March and concluding in November 2010. The committees, collectively, focused on topics and issues that affect the overall township from a policy and service delivery standpoint, as well as issues and land use policies unique to each individual neighborhood. At each steering committee meeting, members were presented with a topic, related data, and a portion of the plan. The committee could accept, reject, or modify the plan as presented. Working with the township staff, their feedback and accepted recommendations were added to the plan. The township contracted with the firm KKG for professional design services to assist in the completion and review of market studies, land use, zoning overlay, development standards, and overall development strategies and recommendations. In the final phase, the plan will be presented to the public for review before final adoption. The completed master plan for Springfield Township will represent a remarkable collaboration of elected officials, professional staff, and concerned citizens of Springfield Township, Ohio. In the final phase, the plan was first presented to the public at the 2011 State of the Township Community Address. The documents were available online, and an open house was held for residents to view the concepts, ask questions, and provide feedback. A public hearing was hosted, and the plan was later adopted. The complete master plan for Springfield Township represents a remarkable collaboration of elected officials, professional staff, and concerned citizens of Springfield Township, Ohio. The neighborhood master plan recommendations are broken down into 4 sections. Section 1 pertains to the plans for township services, operations and policies, and outlines plans for special projects and intergovernmental relations. Section 2 covers recommendations for the overall land use development of the township. Section 3 details the individual neighborhood plan recommendations, and Section 4 is a conceptual design for development defined as the core area.
So I appreciate you hanging in there, but that gives you a little bit of the background. Now, obviously, not all those meetings were just about the core, but the core came out of that master plan and was a part of this entire process. Because the township owned roughly the 50-plus acres of this site, there was a more detailed plan done for this particular area. That was the conceptual master plan that's been on our website since about 2011. It wasn't the plan. There was no developer behind that plan necessarily. What it was done is just conceptually to show how this area could potentially be developed. One of the main goals was to make a connection back up to the Winton and Galbraith area. The gateway as you come off Cross County Highway into the township is the connection that we were trying to meet. The mixed-use economic development was designed to accomplish a number of different things. First off, to meet the housing needs that we already identified and were identified in the housing study, to attract new residents, but as importantly, to retain our residents, because otherwise they were going to move out. We had several of our residents moving out of the township because they couldn't find the housing that they wanted, and that then also prevented other people from moving into their homes and have that healthy recycle. We were looking to create that park and gathering space, and also we wanted something that was going to be catalytic. And what I mean by that is some new development that was going to spur and rise the township up. There hasn't been a whole lot of new development in the township because we are predominantly built out. And so we needed something that was be catalytic to energize the retail corridor as well. This is just kind of a summary of the process. And again, not every bit of this was just about the Warder piece or the area that we refer to as core, but in general, the core was a part of that. There were 28 different trustee meetings where this process, this plan, or this property was discussed. There's been, I think, 24 different newspaper stories. There have been 11 public meetings that we talked about early in putting this plan together. The steering committee met for 8 months on 8 different occasions. We had 2 open house meetings, 2 public hearings on this plan, and then 4 State of the Townships beginning in 2011 where we talked about this plan and introduced it. So again, when folks say I didn't know anything about it, I understand that. Maybe if something isn't right there and burning and you're not concerned about something, maybe you're not aware, but there was a very, very involved process where postcards were sent out and newsletter articles and all kinds of different things that we did in this process to get as much feedback as we possibly could. I want to kind of get now to the part why you're all here so that you can see the plans, and I want to introduce our development and design team. First off will be Tom Nyer, who is the president of St. Francis Group, Sean Bonds, who's the managing director of St. Francis Group, and then Jeff Razor, who is a principal with Glazer Works, who has been engaged by St. Francis Group to do some of the preliminary planning. So, Tom, I'll turn things over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. Are we working? We are working. Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for spending some of your time with us this evening. If your alternative was watching reruns from last night's Bengals game, you're welcome. You'd much rather be here than doing that, but you are here in Springfield Township because you care about your community. My name is Tom Nyer, and I have the great privilege of being here at the request of Mike and your elected representatives. A lot of Mike's slides had the headline, Why? And we'll talk a little bit about why we're here, why St. Francis Group does what we do, how we do it, who we are, what we do, and where we are in the process, and when what we try to accomplish really makes sense. So this is our mission statement, and if you can't read it from the back of the room, that's okay. I'll just tell you what our tagline is. Our tagline is prosperity through property and policy. And property and policy is what my entire life has been about. I've been in this room a bunch with some of these people and some of you in a previous life when I was Hamilton County Commissioner. I spent 6 years as County Commissioner, and that was a great honor. I enjoyed it. It was a great time to do it. I'm glad I just did it for 6 years. I think that was the right time to learn a lot and then to get back involved full-time in what was my family business, which is commercial real estate. You might have seen a lot of Nyer signs around town. I am part of the Nyer family. We all started as one company, which was started in 1894 by my great-grandfather, and we've been around commercial real estate for a long, long time. But at the intersection of property, which is my family business, and policy, which is my personal avocation, that's where the St. Francis Group resides. Now, it's not just me. Lucky for me, Sean Bondas started this company with me about 4 years ago. We have some other professionals back at the office and here in the room. And I'm very, very proud of the work that we do and the way that we do it, and very excited to bring it to you here in Springfield Township. So that's a little bit of the why. It's because it's the way I like to do it, and I think it's the way it works. When I grew up in the commercial real estate business, and in that business, you start digging holes when you're 12. Back then, really big, really complicated, really far-sighted real estate projects required what's called a public-private partnership. Something where the private sector and the public sector had to work together. Well, today, they all do. Without the public sector, The private sector really can't do what it needs to do because the entitlements, the complicated financing, the timing, the infrastructure, all that stuff that the public sector does uniquely well. The public sector, on the other hand, they want to do projects that require some of the expertise and the flexibility and the aptitude and the focus that a private sector can bring. Governments, of necessity, are expert generalists. A project like this requires some specific expertise, and that's what we try to bring. And so we've been doing this in this context for 4 years. Actually, we were previously involved with property advisors, and so in that context, we've been part of the Springfield Township community for a long time. My wife grew up just down the street across from the Y, and I went to high school just down the street the other way. So I have a fair level of commitment to Springfield Township, and I'm excited to hear more about what your commitment is and where you think it should go. What do we do? So some services that are up here, and the specific discipline that we're bringing to this is a master developer, which means that we are working at your behest and at the behest of your elected representatives and their staff to come up with a master vision for the project. Part of the unique asset that I think St. Francis Group brings is we too are expert generalists. There are some people who just do industrial bulk buildings, and that's fine. There's some people who just do residential, and that's fine. There's some people who do hotels. There's some people who do apartment buildings, who do office buildings. That's all well and good. But as they say, if all you have is a nail, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And what we try to do is we try to bring the unique attributes of every site. We compare them and combine them with unique capital to provide a project that is uniquely appropriate for the site in question. So, you know, I have done lots of hotel deals. We have done lots and lots of office deals, industrial deals, residential deals, retail deals. Parenthetically, we've never done a Section 8 deal. And we do a lot of projects that are mixed because actually most commercial real estate projects today, to a greater or lesser extent, are mixed use. And so that's why what we refer to ourselves as sector agnostic, because we don't want to cram what we do onto your site. We want your site and your process to speak to us so that we can put the very best possible project forward for your community. That project and that community, however, does have to be rooted in feasibility. And a lot of times, I say what our first job is to connect community aspirations with market realities. And you know, you can do all the wonderful, you can have pretty pictures and great drawings and big ideas, and nothing ever happens. And that means there's less and less development, there's less and less economic capacity. That means that the people who are here have to pay more and more in taxes to support less and less involvement and less activity. Economic capacity is created when actually something happens, and that's where our market studies come into play. Once we come up with what the market tells us, then we get more specific. We do strategic plans, we do development plans. We work with people like Jeff Razor at Glazelworks, from whom you'll hear in a moment. We work with engineers, and we start to put a development plan together. Then we actually do it. And that's the neat part, is when the actual progress goes into the ground, and it's a project of which everyone's really thrilled because it is respectful of the inherent opportunities that are in that site. Oftentimes we will work with our public sector partners to produce some grants because not all the funds are available in the private sector. They're not available in your limited public resources, so we sometimes have to go outside and get capital to bring into your community. Where are we doing this currently? There's some specific projects. I'll just mention them briefly. In a previous incarnation, we had an office in Washington, D.C. And I enjoyed that, and that was fine. That was interesting. It was good for diversification. But we sold that in 2007, and I'm really glad that we did because, frankly, there's more than enough good stuff to do here in greater Cincinnati. We are strictly within a 100-mile radius. I like being here. It is my home. It will always be my home. It's where I'm raising my family. And so these are some projects that are right around this community right now. Aero Hub is off the Glendale-Milford Road intersection with I-75, trying to build on some of the existing resources that are present with General Electric and their suppliers. North King is a development in Springdale that's been lying fallow for a long, long time that is finally about to get shaken off because we started with a market study that said, here's something that will actually happen, as opposed to everything that you think would be nice but will never, ever happen. And we've been working with private and public sector there to bring things together. Course View Commons, it's a project up in Mason, Ohio. again, mixed use. There's an educational component to it. There's a office component. There's a retail component. Rose Lawn, this is an interesting example. I actually have the study in my hand. This is where a lot of these market feasibility studies start. And again, very different community, and that's part of what we like. You know, what is appropriate in Mason is different than what's appropriate in Rose Lawn, but there are appropriate things that can take place in those communities just there as there are here in Springfield Township. College Hill Station, just down North Bend Road at Hamilton. There's a 7.5 acre parcel on 2 sites that, again, has been lying fallow for a long, long time. And the city has engaged us to actually bring a mixed-use project out of the ground there. So that is that's a lot of the why and the what and the where, but the when is right here when you actually get to green, and that's not where we are yet. Right now we're up here. We are in this preliminary market and research analysis. You know, we are functionally writing one of these reports. But your trustees said, actually, we're sick of having reports. We'd actually like you to do something. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're essentially doing this work, and your township gets it. And they'll get the project, and this participation is a part of this process where we stand right now. We will go through all this. What are the highest and best uses? Again, that intersection of aspiration and market reality. What's the strategic plan? What's realistic? How do we finance it? What's all the what I call the ugly money? What do you have to put beneath the ground that if you don't spend the right ugly money, the pretty money never happens? How do you work through the whole thing? How do you get a bank to finance it? Then you're under construction, and that's when the economic capacity of your community gets realized, is when a project actually comes out of the ground. Not a project that takes 54 acres and paves it, not a project that abandons trees, that abandons lakes, not a project that is something of which you would not be proud, but a project is something that you can actually possess and something that you and your children can have as a community resource for a long time to come. So that's a little bit about me. That's a lot about my company and my team. Thank you very much for your time. Now I'm eager to hear a lot more from you and from our colleague Jeff Razor from Glazer Works.
I thought you were going to say.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Racer, and I'm an architect with Glazer Works, and I'm working for the St. Francis Group, and am here to present a 3-part presentation. I'm going to talk just briefly about the 2011 plan and what we derived from that plan as far as this particular site is concerned. I'm going to talk a little bit about our very early preliminary analysis that we've done of the site, and then finally, the bulk of my presentation is going to be showing some development concepts that we've come up with. I call this section a continuation of effort because it truly is a continuation of effort. The 2011 plan and the rest of the studies and plans that were done immediately prior to it was very, very helpful to us as we started our little journey here. And I have to tell you, a lot of times I work with community groups such as this, and they don't have any comprehensive planning in place. Nothing, no foundation whatsoever. So we're left to sort of grasp at what the will of the community is. So this document has been very helpful. And even though the document was done on a very large scale, 30,000 square foot or 30,000 foot above sea level view, over 12 neighborhoods, all of Springfield Township, we thought that the plan was very well done and pointed us in certain key directions, particularly when it comes to the Warder Nursery site or the core district site. There are a number of things that came forth specific to this site. Chief among them was we want a mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly development. But we don't want to forget the natural surroundings and setting of the development. We did note the caption of this, and I bring special attention to this because simply put, it says we want a higher density neighborhood with a community center. And that community center will be very important as we start down our road. We're going to go back to that community center idea a lot. There were a number of maps that were in the plan that we thought were very telling. The one on the left in particular shows a great deal of connectivity. Connectivity was an expressed desire for this site because I think the idea was that this site is very, very isolated at this point. and it should be more accessible and more connected to the rest of the community. Also, what we noticed was that the plan that should come forward on the Warder site should respect the natural surroundings. It doesn't have to be, as Tom said, broad brush across the site. It can be done in pockets. There can be pockets of development, and we can leave a lot of the natural wonder that is there. Now, the site analysis, we've only been working on this for about 3 months, which is a very short amount of time when you're talking about master planning efforts. So we've really just begun looking at the site. In fact, we don't even have a survey on the site yet. The maps that you'll see are all derived based on CAGIS maps from Hamilton County. But we have walked the site, we've looked at it, and we've taken a look at a few statistics, and so we do have some thoughts on the site. The first thing I want to note is boundary line. Everything that you see there in blue is what the township owns. That is the fact. Now, we don't want to plan in a vacuum. We want to consider what adjacencies are out there that might be worthwhile. We know that the school system is currently grappling with how to create or maintain facilities for the far future, for the 20-year, 40-year future. And we understand that Whitaker School is in the mix there. So we don't want to plan with blinders on. We want to consider what would happen if this site suddenly became available, and maybe even consider how we might help the school district with its challenges. Then the other site is more obviously the Warder Nursery site itself. The city of Cincinnati still owns this property. They're still operating a nursery out of there. They're growing plants there. And so at some point in time, the city might decide to sell this. And so we want to think what is a good integration of this site into ours. So I want to be clear, everything inside that hard boundary line is what the township owns. The township does not own the Whitaker School site, and it does not own the Warder Nursery site, the greenhouses that are there, but we want to consider those as we move forward in the master planning. One of the first things we've noticed in our early analysis is traffic. There's no surprise here. Winton Road is a very heavily traveled artery. In fact, there are 48,000 cars that go up and down Winton Road on an average daily basis. We think that there is a bit of an issue with some morning peak travel, the people coming to St. X High School from the north, from Cross County Highway and from Galbraith. So we know that there's a morning peak issue down at that intersection, so that could be a challenge for us. But we think that there might also be an opportunity with 48,000 sets of eyes driving up and down that street. North Bend Road doesn't have nearly the traffic on it, only has 14,000, but it also has peak morning and afternoon peak issues with regard to the high school. So as I mentioned, in my world, I do mostly pedestrian-friendly mixed-use design. And so in my world, when you see 48,000 cars, it's usually not a good thing. It's usually a challenge, a hurdle that we have to deal with. But there is an aspect to it which could be positive, and that is visibility. Going back to what we read in the comprehensive plan, in the 2011 Neighborhood Master Plan, connectivity to this site is a goal we need to keep in mind. Not just physical connectivity, but also visual connectivity. And it might provide us with some commercial viability as well. There are certain available connection points from the two border roads, North Bend and Winton. We think that on Winton there is the possibility for one, maybe even two connection points for street connections, two if you count the Whitaker School site. And on North Bend Road, we think there's probably an opportunity for one major connection. There might also be secondary connection points. And this is not necessarily streets, but sidewalks or bike trails or walking trails that might come from the neighborhood streets to the south, possibly even the street to the north. I know it's a private street, so I heard that loud and clear. And then maybe even to the Warder site itself, to the Warder Nursery site itself. In fact, as Mike mentioned earlier, I believe there is still a covenant on the deed which requires at least the possibility of an access drive. And the next thing we noticed about the site was obviously the trees. Now there are some large clearings on the site, areas with no vegetation whatsoever, but most of the site is covered with vegetation of some sort. There's lots of low brush, there are bushes, low trees, but then there are also these areas of really wonderful upper canopy trees. And they tend to come in cluster areas. There are the large areas to the north and to the east, but even in the body of the site, there are some really wonderful clusters of 80, 100-foot tall, mostly oak trees. So we would definitely want to keep those in mind. So what we've done in this early stage of the game is we've mapped those trees to some degree so that we keep our eye on as we move forward in the planning process. And then, as somebody mentioned before, there are 2 ponds here. Or maybe it's 1 pond with a road dividing the 2. And so these are lovely little ponds. They're very hidden, they're very isolated. You have to really walk on that path to go find them. But we think this is a wonderful asset that we can build upon, maybe even improve. And then there's topography. This is not a simple topography. Simple topography is there's 1 high point and 1 low point, and the land slopes in that one direction. This is complex topography. There are a number of low points and valleys, and there are a number of high points. And they are not organized in any rational fashion. It is a site that likes to do this. So we want to note that. We want to work with the land. We don't want to work on top of it or bulldoze it. We want to work with the land and take our cues from the topography as to what we can do with this property here. So that's our very, very early site analysis. And as we move forward, we're going to do more site analysis and figure out more about what this property is all about. But we do have some planning concepts. And really, at this stage of the game, they're more concepts than plans. I have to tell you, don't be expecting a lot of pictures about what these buildings look like. We just haven't gotten that far. So what we do have are some guiding principles that we've derived from the plan, from talking with township staff, and from working with the St. Francis group. And we've called those 5 guiding principles our themes. 1 is connectivity. There is, of course, the physical connectivity that we discussed before with streets, bike paths, and sidewalks. We also think that there's a need for visual connectivity and also a civic connectivity. We want everybody in Springfield Township to feel like they own and can be a part of this park or of this development. Iconic. This is a word we've heard over and over again. We realize that Springfield Township has not seen a lot of new development in recent years. And what development it has seen has been, not to irritate anybody, but it's not the greatest stuff. You know, there are a lot of shopping centers and a lot of strip malls in America. Do we really need more of them? So what we heard is that we want a truly iconic development to happen here, something that you just can't find in any other part of our region. Cultivation. We, in addition to preserving what's great about it, about the land, we also want to make it better. Like take the lakes, for instance. The lakes are nice, but they are isolated. One of them has got algae green on the smaller one is algae on the top. So we want to improve those lakes. We don't want to fill them in. I read that on a website, and that's just absurd. Nobody I've ever talked to about this project has ever said we're going to fill in a lake. In fact, if anything, we want to grow them a little bit and make them better, make them more useful. So we want to cultivate this site. Mixed use. For the last 60, 70 years, most development in this country was single use, predominantly one use, either a shopping center or an office park or residential. And that is still a pervasive pattern. But in recent past, real estate developers and cities have remembered that mixed-use developments are very viable for the long term. They are economically sustainable. People love to live there. People love to work there. They love to go grab a bite to eat there. So there are wonderful opportunities with a mixed-use development. And something that separates Springfield Township from all the rest of the mixed-use developments that I'm approached about designing is the Arts and Events Center that you guys want to put together. I think that is probably the biggest game changer about this development. And then finally, catalytic. If we do our jobs well, then we can add a development to the Springfield Township landscape that brings the entire township up. And it makes people who have visited here want to relocate their business here. Maybe want to not leave here when they're ready to empty nest, but rather buy a condo in one of our places that we provide for them. So keeping those 5 themes in mind, we came up with some development concepts. They're really ideas at this point. In order to illustrate that for tonight, we haven't even gotten to the point of drawing buildings yet or streets or what buildings might actually look like. So what we've decided to do for tonight's presentation is grab photographs of buildings and bridges and parks and other projects from around the country that we think adequately represent the character and the scale of what we might want to do here. We think the highest and best use along Winton Road, particularly if the Whitaker School site is available, is predominantly office mixed use. We think that this could be a beneficial spot for this use, this mix of uses, because of the visibility from Winton Road. We also think that it's very desirable for the township to have that visibility so that this site emerges to a greater public awareness. But these office buildings don't have to be glass box office buildings behind a sea of asphalt that you might find in some suburban or exurban area. We think we can design office buildings that are human scaled, that are very personal, and that create wonderful walkable places around them. And even the places between buildings, if we cultivate those spaces and design them well, we can make those spaces worthy of attention. We can make those places where you might want to have lunch if you're an office worker there or a resident living down the street. Oh, and we don't want any of the people who are in this office environment, any of the office workers, to feel like they're ever too far away from the natural setting that is the land that we're developing. We think that the mixing of uses, the best opportunity for mixing of the most uses, can happen in what I call a main street environment. The character of a main street would have relatively narrow streets with sidewalks, buildings fairly close to the sidewalk, a compact development form so that we can get a certain degree of vitality, walkable vitality, with the mixing of uses in these buildings. The first floors will be predominantly retail, and restaurant and cafes, but maybe even professional service. My office, my architecture firm office, is on the first floor storefront of a building in downtown Cincinnati. We think the upper stories of these buildings could be a residential office. There could be a yoga studio on the second floor of buildings. When you design and develop great mixed-use neighborhoods, businesses pop up from all over the place that want to locate there because they want to be part of that vibrancy. And if we design these buildings well and the spaces around these buildings well, we can create little pocket parks that are distributed around that are wonderful places to have lunch or just to meet somebody for a cup of coffee. On the eastern wing of this site, where the site gets fairly narrow toward North Bend, we think a predominantly residential mix of uses would be best. In fact, maybe even exclusively residential. We think that because the property is narrow here, any road that would come across would be, we would also want to be fairly narrow, maybe even walkable or maybe of a rural character. But we think a building form that might house great residents here might be row house-ish. That's because a row house can be done in a fairly compact manner, leaving as much property or as much land and trees and topography as is. We also happen to know that this product form is in high demand throughout the rest of Cincinnati, the Cincinnati market area. And as I mentioned with the office workers and the office component of the development, we want the residences to be designed so that they're part of the natural surroundings, not fighting it. We want the people who move and live here to never feel like they're that far away from the natural setting that is the Warder Nursery site. Then the part that I feel is the game changer for the township. I get approached by a lot of developers and communities, and they want mixed-use developments, and they have the main three uses: residential, office, and retail. But the use that I've heard you say you want, your township representatives say you want, also includes an event center, an arts center, and a theater. And I think this is the big differentiating factor that will make this development a very, very desirable development. Now, the building types that can come here is the broadest range of all. They could be the most naturalistic buildings with timber and stone, or they might be brick and stone, a little bit more urban. But I think regardless of what building type we end up with here for the event center, I think that the architecture needs to be aspirational. I think this needs to be a place that people will remember fondly. If they attend their niece's wedding at wedding reception at an event here, I think they need to go back to whatever city they came from and say, you would not believe this place that I went to in Springfield Township. This township has got it going. That will contribute to the iconic nature that we hope to build here. Oh, and it needs to be state-of-the-art. One thing we've learned in our firm, we do event centers. This happens to be a photograph of an event center that opened up about a year and a half ago, is the most sustainable ones, the ones that have the longest lasting viability are the ones that are state-of-the-art. This event center, they don't have to say no to anyone. A nonprofit that's doing a fundraiser with 100 attendees or the Fortune 500 company, they can say yes to anyone because they've got the technological capabilities to do so. We also realize that Springfield Township has some great stuff going on already. The Arts Connect program is something that the arts programs that you all have going here are pretty wonderful stuff. A lot of times when we get approached by communities who want to put together an art center or an event center, they have a fledgling organization, or maybe no organization at all. You guys have up and running arts organizations ready to go, and I think that's a huge attribute in this case. So regardless of what the architecture may look like, we feel that this is a wonderful setting for an event center, art center, cultural arts center. And we can't help but recognize the fact that there may very well be a tie-in with the Charlie Harper estate, since Charlie Harper is so tied to Springfield Township. So we want to examine the possibility as we move forward of a Harper Museum. And then the last component is the public spaces. And this can go all the way from the area of the site that is the most heavily wooded and the most hilly, topographical. And if you haven't walked the site back in here, you should know that there's a little creek bed there, some wonderful woods. It's heavily wooded, a really wonderful place. And we think we need to leave that alone, or at the most, increase trails, make some a trail network to go through there so that people can find their way back there and that it's very comforting. We also think that these trails can come out of those woods and permeate through the rest of the site so that people can bike along them. We have discovered that Hamilton County does not have any bona fide bike path plans for this portion of Springfield Township, but we still feel like there's an opportunity here for bike trails to weave their way through the neighborhood, not just on our site, but in adjacent sites as well. And then, as I mentioned before, we want to cultivate the assets that are there and the ones that we build in the future as well, like the lakes. The lakes right now are very, very hidden. The one is algae covered. So we think we can make these much better places, maybe even increase the size of them. And if we build a great lawn, clear out some of the brush and build a great lawn, a place where people can assemble for the 4th of July fireworks or for a concert, we think we can create a wonderful setting, not just for the natural surroundings, but also the buildings that are there populating the site. And along with that, there is a certain amount of iconography that can happen with a bridge. A bridge is one of the rare opportunities that a community has to create a character identity that permeates through the site. So we think that the bridge between the two lakes, if it's something more than the land bridge it is now, can be iconic also. It doesn't necessarily have to be a stone bridge like this really, really expensive stone bridge, but it could be a metal one or a wood one. I would not suggest a covered bridge. I think you already have one of those here. But there's a chance for building something truly special on the site. And then also with a great lawn, last thing we want to do is flatten it, bulldoze it and make it flat. We're not looking to make a putting green or a croquet lawn. We want to leave it hilly. We think that's a good thing. Work with the land that we've got there. One of the things that we know there is a desire for in Springfield Township and that would work well with the land is an amphitheater. We think that amphitheaters work wonderfully in hilly topography if we place it right. So we can build an amphitheater, and maybe it's one like this that's brick and built, roofed, or maybe it's one that's a light imprint that's really a paver stage and just terraced, the lightest touch of stone and concrete terracing of the lawn in front. So when you take these idea bubbles where we believe the highest and best uses are, and you put them to a road network, a preliminary road network, this is what we come up with. This is our first blush effort at trying to map out where uses might go, where the mixed uses might set themselves, where the great lawn might be, keeping in mind the natural things that we want to keep, those big clusters of 80-foot tall oak trees, the woods in the northeast and the lakes. And so we think that a plan like this is a good starting point for us to move forward. You will note in one of the maps that was in the 2011 plan, it showed a street connection that was dead straight. And now that was just a very schematic rendering, but we think that it might be not wise to build a dead straight road connection from Winton Road to North Bend Road, because then it's going to, the tendency is going to be for people to speed through there. It's really going to become highly traveled, maybe even speedy travel way for cars. So if we bend that road around, and when we put it in stop signs and intersections and places where cars have to stop and make a turn, we think those are the elements that increase the viability of a pedestrian-oriented mixed-use development. And there's one more slide I want to show you. I mentioned the Whitaker School site. We don't know what the school district's plans are. I know there have been preliminary conversations. We want to work with them to figure out what their plans are, but I do think that it might be possible for us to locate a school here. Now, I don't know what size they want and what shape, if it's a campus, one building or two buildings, but I do want to leave you with the thought that I do think this development, among its mix of uses, we can put a school here to take the place of Whitaker School if we need to.
Well, they're changing the microphones and we get into the public feedback, I just wanted to talk briefly about what the next steps of the process would be. And the idea of the feedback is that the idea of getting public feedback is for the design team to take that, refine their plan. They will then go to market. And then thinking, Sean, I think we talked probably April, May timeframe, we would do this again and continue to refine the plan through the process based on the feedback that they get both from the community and from the market.
Okay. For the discussion, there are mics here in the front of the room. I would ask people to come up, ask people to state their name so that we know who's speaking, and that then ask your question. And what I am going to ask is that we really try to ask a question. If you know who you want to direct it to, that's great. If you don't, ask the question and I'll direct it to somebody to get it started. So, want to come up? That way everybody can hear. Yes.
Hi, my name is Eileen Lee, and I'm speaking to the Finneytown trustees and administrators. I've lived in Finneytown for 37 years. My son graduated from the high school here. I live on Warder Drive. I spoke at the original meeting at the PAC Center at Finneytown High School when the township was about to acquire the property. There was lots of notices about that meeting. The PAC Center was almost full. I assumed there were all these meetings. I collected signatures. Clearly, I'm with the other team. I collected signatures. No one has heard about a meeting. And I am shocked, as I guess you are, as we say this. Look at the crowd here. People have not heard about this. And it's really disheartening. And I guess I'd like some response to, if all of us, I collected signatures on Warder Drive and on some other streets. I think I collected maybe 50, 75 signatures. No one had heard of this. Most of the people I spoke to have lived here for years. Who did you have at these meetings? Certainly not, excuse me, I don't mean to be funny here. Certainly not the people who live around Water Park. I know of one person on Bryn Mawr who was on a committee, but I don't know of anyone else in my area who was. And I'm really shocked.
So that's directed at the elected officials who would like to.
Or the administrators.
just like to say, I think that people, and I shared this with a couple of other individuals who are concerned about water, that there are times in all of our lives when we may be focusing on a lot of other things, but I think a lot of, excuse me, please. But I'm glad that we had this meeting because there were a lot of misperceptions, a lot of myths, a lot of rumors. And I think this meeting is an excellent opportunity for those that may not have been aware of it, that they are aware of it now. But there were multiple meetings throughout the years, as Mike had already indicated in detail with the slide that we had up there before. We were very visible. It wasn't the best kept secret. People were involved and engaged.
Well, you certainly weren't as visible as initially. You were never at the PAC Center. It was never community-wide. I worked here. I had an office on Fleming and Winton. And I never saw it. Now, I do not get on your website very often. I am 71 years old. I'm not interested in a lot of computer stuff, okay? But I used to get quarterly newsletters from you all. I read them. I never saw it. I'm sorry. I'm flabbergasted.
I would have to say this was, we used to put out quarterly newsletters. We had to discontinue those just because of the cost. Some of the state cuts that we've had in our funds, it just became impossible to continue those. We did feature this in that. This has been on our website, I would say, what, Mike, for years? I mean, it's been
On there for about 5 years. When we had the meeting, when we did the neighborhood, and I'm assuming you're not talking about this meeting. You're talking about the meeting in 2011?
I never heard of that meeting.
Okay. Well, on that meeting, what we did is we sent out notices to each neighborhood. In the Finneytown, in the case of Finneytown, we divided Finneytown into Finneytown North and Finneytown South. That meeting was actually held in this room. I want to say we had about 150 attend. We had notices sent to every household in Finneytown. There was a letter.
Yeah.
Like a little postcard. It was like a postcard sent to each household. Well, I mean, you can say no, maybe you don't remember it, but we did send it.
But there are so many of us here, and I don't think any of us are pleased with any of this.
Here's what I'd like to do. Let's see if people also have questions about the plan itself as well. So, when it comes to the... Wait a
I have a
minute.
question and a request. So just to follow up on that point, I saw you actually listed names of people in each of the committees. Is there any way we could get a list of names of who were those people? And you also mentioned a study done that said we need condos and mixed use. Can we actually see the results of the study? So that's my question. And then my request is, regardless of what happened, obviously people feel uninformed. Going forward, can we have a steering committee now? How can we participate versus just being updated going forward?
Good question. Good question.
Somebody want to respond to that?
For some of that, I don't know that we want to take people that, there's been a lot of, first of all, we're blessed by having, I think, a great community. I've spent my whole adult life here. We have a lot of concerned citizens. I don't want this to be a deal, though, where we're going to try and put those people that spent many hours of their time on the spot. I will tell you that any of the studies that we conducted in the past that have shown the need for some of this kind of stuff, you're certainly welcome to those. Those are all things that are in the public record.
Find those? Are those on the website somehow?
Well,
or?
contact us and we'll get them for you. I don't think, we have that, and we can get that for you. And it was because of some of these studies, because of people coming to us and saying, I'm leaving Springfield Township because there's not the kind of housing there that I want. The couple I bought my house from left the township because they said we can't find what we want here. So it was because of that that we started thinking about mixed use for this property. As to how we going forward here, that's a process.
Let's give everybody a chance here.
Yeah, if everybody could try and listen. As we move forward here, that's part of what this meeting's about. This is not something that's cast in stone. People kept coming to me and saying, what's your plan? What's your plan? And I've said, there is no plan yet. There are concepts, there are ideas, but it's going to be the St. Francis group that is looking to see what works here, what doesn't. And they're going to come back to the community.
So I'll let somebody else, but just through these meetings is the way we'll give input. Will there be a committee at this point that we can be involved in, or?
My understanding is as we move forward, when the group, St. Francis group, begins to move, just as they have tonight, we'll have meetings to share what some of their expectations are, and it's important that the community is involved in attending those meetings to give their perspective and give their input. That is so critical. We had another development out on Mill Road at one point where the community met with the developer, and they were able, with their suggestions, to modify the concepts and plans to fit that particular community, and it worked out really well. I think the St. Francis group is excellent, I know it is, and we'll continue to have open meetings and public hearings and keep the lines of communication open. That's critical.
Just so you all know, the first time we saw what you saw here tonight, that's the first time I saw it also. So it's not like we've been looking at plans for months and doing all that. That's the first time I saw what you saw tonight. I saw it for the first time tonight also.
Yep.
So it could change depending on what, uses they find available.
I would like to say that as somebody who has taught in the School of Planning at UC, planning is a long process, and we're looking at a very early concept stage here. So it's not, I believe it when I see these. These are, there's nothing set in stone here. There's nothing set anywhere. Nothing set in the dirt. So, it's just, this is still a very malleable and fluid project. By the way, there's a second mic over here, but we can keep going. Please come forward, say your name.
Hi, I'm Nancy Healy. I live on Bellamy Court. I regularly walk uphill to Warder Nursery. There's a creek behind my house that regularly flash floods. I have a neighbor that already has drainage problems. So once this is developed, I have severe concerns with how are drainage and flooding going to be addressed. How are we going to be certain that all the neighborhoods around here are not going to be adversely affected with drainage problems? Secondly, I heard you say about improving the lakes, maybe making them bigger. Now, are these going to be maintained as the wildlife lakes they are that support the migratory birds, the blue herons, the numerous wildlife we have there? Or are they going to be turned into sterile catchment basins that catch the runoff full of oil, road salt, and lawn chemicals? Next, you say you want this to be an iconic development with buildings close to the sidewalk and narrow roads. I don't care what you do. All I see there is a shortcut to St. X High School. You will have hundreds of cars going through that neighborhood every single morning. So how are you going to prevent that and keep your future residents happy? And I will end with 3 words. When I see this, what comes to mind? Forest Fair Mall.
Okay, there were multiple questions there, just to try to respond to some of them. The first one was the question about drainage, and it's drainage on your street is that you were concerned about.
No, drainage in the whole area, because that creek that runs behind.
Okay, drainage, but also your neighbor, you were saying. So,
All around this development are drainage issues, not just my street, every street around there and everything going downhill.
somebody want to,
I can take
can we bring Tom's up?
if you'd like, I'd be happy to take a crack at each of those. First of all, neither this development nor any other development is going to cure every drainage issue in Springfield Township. I want to be very clear about that. That said, I think maybe I saw Ted Hubbard back there. and your Hamilton County engineer and your Springfield Township planning staff are going to make sure that this drains better. I mean, water is wild, and wild doesn't always drain very well. There's a reason for that. And so the engineering, we've already engaged a civil engineering firm as part of our design team, will absolutely consider that. And the water site itself will not have any adverse impact on the surrounding areas as a result of whatever development happens there. Additionally to that, there will be pressure that's taken off. But I want to be clear, it's not going to fix everything in that area. So that was point one. Point
Lakes.
two, I'm sorry?
The lakes.
The lakes. So the lakes, frankly, the lakes right now, they have quite a collection of car parts. They have algae. They have a range of other things. And so.
All right, wait a minute.
I think
one person at a time here.
So what I'm hearing you, is this going to be a retention basin that's similar to an office park? No. Will it be integrated into the overall area drainage problem to help take care of the problems you addressed in your first question? Absolutely, because it's topography. It just rolls. And so you've got 54 acres that have to be balanced, and they have to be balanced in a way that is artistically, economically, and practically achievable. What was the third question?
And the third question is the traffic issue, especially in the morning or afternoon with St. Xavier High School.
So I was one of those kids a little longer ago than I would care to recall. And I guarantee you, whatever the fastest way is, that's what I'm going to take. And so the design objective is to respect what we're hearing in this room and, frankly, what the aspirations are of all the constituents in that park. If we want to make it a throughway, we can make it a throughway. That suggests a certain sort of infrastructure and width and alignment. This is not, I mean, again, this is just a concept, but the objective is to make it so that it is not a throughway. That's the design objective, and I frankly agree with you.
Sir, over here.
I want to start off again. Before this meeting started, Handicap made a big statement about all the stuff that was going on, which we never even heard about. We don't know nothing about it, and so he just said it tonight. Saturday, who in the heck was the people that members of the committees, the 8 different committees that was chosen to start the process in the first place? And thirdly, we have an asset there in the Warder Nursery itself, and that is an environmental situation where we have green space, which is very, very rapidly disappearing across the country. We know that if anybody went to high school and he's a physical science lesson, he knows damn well that the trees and the shrubbery that contributes to the oxygen in the air and contributes to the habitat. It also supports the general wildlife in the area. Our population are put in condos and restaurants and swimming pool basins and bike paths and all the concrete and stuff like that. It absorbs heat from the sun, and it creates an environmental hazard. And here we're showing a year-long benefit to the community out for a couple of buildings of concrete that's not going to do a damn bit of good for anything. And when you put that stuff out there, you only have to have more patrolmen out there, more expense to the township for patrolmen. You don't have to have more street maintenance. You only have to have more.
I'd like to maybe direct at one point that you were really making, because it's pretty fundamental, and I'm not sure who it goes to. I think it's to the staff or to the elected officials, and that is, why not just leave it as an environmental site as opposed to, and as opposed to any sort of development, you know, before we get into some of the specifics of the development that St. Francis Group is working on. What about that fundamental question? Thank you, sir.
If I could answer.
You have to have roads, you have to supplement the traffic out there, you have to take appropriate housing and property rights to make more room for the roads. You probably don't need to do the same thing for North Bend Road.
Okay.
And the whole thing is a disaster from the word go. We have a very good asset. The city of Cincinnati will send people out to the Warder Nursery just to walk around and put those grass.
Okay.
There's a lot of people down Cincinnati that don't know what the grass looks like.
I'm very aware of all the people standing behind you, so I want to move on. And does somebody want to take that fundamental question of total green space, total non-touching it versus something happening here?
Well, I think one of the reasons that we have not considered leaving this just as a natural area, I can think of at least two compelling ones. One of the first is we probably have more green space in our community than any other one in Hamilton County. Correct. We have over 3,000 acres. Almost 1/3 of Springfield Township is either composed of Winton Woods, Glenview Park, or we have 12 parks within our township that the township maintains of approximately 120 acres. This is about 50 acres. So 1/3 of the township right now is green space, and so that's one of the reasons. Another reason, though, is because the first lady that was up here said she wanted to address it to the Finneytown trustees. We're not Finneytown trustees. We're Springfield Township trustees. Springfield Township is a big, diverse place. We go from almost out to Glendale in the northeast, all the way to John Gray Road and Hamilton Avenue in the northwest. The township goes all the way down to where the old Providence Hospital used to be. And there are parts of the township over on the east side of I-75 down where the old distillery is. We're a very big area. We have a lot of different communities, a lot of different neighborhoods, and a large constituency that we have to represent. So we bought this property to preserve our core area in the first place because, please respect me and let me finish speaking. So we bought this because the way it is, if a developer comes in, such as we had Brisbane develop Galbraith Point, and nobody's happy about that, and if they have the right zoning, they can do whatever they want as a matter of law, and you can't stop it. We can't stop it, no one can. And so it was for that reason we tried to get control of this to protect our community. And it's our goal to try and work with everybody, including everybody here, that we come up with something. But it cannot just be that we sunk $1.2 million into a property which will have no return for this community as a whole. We have to represent everyone. As trustees, we have a fiduciary to all our citizens.
Ma'am, you want?
Good evening. I'm Carrie Reisner.
You can pull that up.
So you don't have to ban. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm Carrie Reisner. I live on Denier Place. First, I'd like to thank you for this meeting and also the very fine presentation. It does, however, confirm my concern and opposition to this plan. Having a village, theaters, that all comes with parking lots. I know you guys have run the numbers. How many buildings, you have a rough idea of how many buildings you want back there?
That would,
the first thing we have
that would be a developer question. That wouldn't be something that we know.
Right.
Okay. Tom or Jeff?
Yeah, actually, we haven't run the numbers yet. One of the next things we need to do is sit down and figure out exactly how big an event center we need to have, how big of an arts component there is going to be. So no, we haven't run the numbers. We don't know how much parking there is. But I agree with you, that is one of the big components that we have to look at from day one when we're laying out a pedestrian-oriented place, is how we deal with parking. You're absolutely right on that.
Okay, and I haven't heard anything about an environmental impact study. When will that be done?
So environmental impact studies there's a broad continuum of them, and they start with environmental contamination studies, and we will do that as part of this first phase of the due diligence. The impact on the environment gets to things like the stormwater runoff that was mentioned earlier. It gets to stuff like tree studies that Jeff talked about, and so bits and pieces of those will take place all through the next phase of the due diligence over the next 9 months.
Okay, thank you. I have done a little bit of digging and looking at the value of a natural forested area in an urban area. One tree alone can mitigate 48 pounds of CO2. And when you add up all the trees back there, it improves the quality of our air to a large part of our community. The other thing is I looked at the value of these urban areas related to property values. And it's a long-established fact that I'm sure most of you know, if you have trees on your lot or trees running down your street, it improves your property values by about 5 to 10%. In the section that I looked at, the home values that were improved the most by trees was properties bordering a nature preserve, and the value was between 25 and 30%. This is why we're interested in protecting Warder Park. Thank you again. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask people to, because I see the lineup and I see the time, to restrain yourself to one question. This is a long-term process.
Yeah, my name's Jeff King, and I live on North Bend Road, and I'm just one of those people, I guess, that's been under a rock. I mean, I've lived here 20 years, but I knew a little bit about the idea of Warder. I know a lot more because I walk it all the time with my dog. But my understanding was that it was going to be a park, and that's all I ever heard. So my question is, I'm coming to it, is when was the St. Francis group hired as a developer? And what part of the process did that come about? And how come we really didn't know about that? And just one other little quick point is, I think when you measure return, you have to look at it more than economically. And sometimes the value to the community outweighs potential economic return.
So the question of the hiring of the St. Francis group, when did that happen?
Well, that happened this year, and I can tell you we've had numerous public meetings where we've discussed that. You know, our meetings are televised. I know everybody's busy. They probably don't watch them, but we have in public meetings repeatedly talked about this. And I would say, and Tom, you might know better than I, but it was sometime during this year that the contract was actually signed, mid-year, I think.
I think that's correct. I think the gentleman asked two questions, and the first question is, when was the decision made that it was not going to be a park? And I think Mike addressed that in his opening comments. It was sort of a staged process where the economic realities and the planning realities of another park in Springfield Township just made it seem unfeasible. That then got to the next question, which is, okay, therefore what? And I know a number of developers have had different ideas for the property over the years, and through a process of negotiations and discussions with staff and eventually the elected representatives, we signed our contract in March.
Okay, in March. And that was done in public meeting? Public record?
It wasn't signed In a public
I mean, but it was
Yeah.
debated, discussed.
We talked about it at our
And
meeting.
it
All
was
right. In township trustee meeting. Okay.
All right, I have a question.
Oh, pull
Actually, I have
that
two
up.
questions. Okay, I'm gonna pull that up. I'm a tall girl.
There you go.
Monica Lopez, I live on Northern Parkway. But anyway, my two questions are, okay, for one thing, you said put your money where your mouth is, but where's the money going? Okay, in all obvious list, whatever. But no, you don't know about the trees. You don't know about the duckweed. You called it algae. You never been back there. You said you grew up in Finneytown. You went to Finneytown High School. You ever been back there? You ever seen it? Okay, no. And then my other question is, your residency. See all these colored dots over here? That don't leave much green space. But all these colored dots, there's residents that live over there. There's the owls, there's the coyotes, there's the foxes, there's the ducks, and there's the deers. Well, they don't pay taxes. You go ahead and pay your taxes because you're going to pay them anyway. They're going to take it out of your pocket regardless, okay? You must not walk back in water either. But whatever, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him right now. But I really want to know where the money in your mouth is thing is. Huh?
All right. Well,
Where's the gain?
Let me talk to you then. In case I misspoke earlier, I don't believe I did, but my wife grew up in Springfield Township, and she did, and her parents just sold. No, I did not. I went to the high school down the street, which was St. X. So just to make sure I didn't misspeak, I wanted to clear that up. My money is in, frankly, paying the people here, and we don't make any money unless something comes out of that. And the township commitment was that they have decided from a policy perspective that this is something that serves the best, broadest interests of the people in Springfield Township. And they hired us to combine that aspiration with what the market will allow. And so that's what we've hired to do, and there's absolutely a public input process to that.
One more question, and then I quit. How come not Cottonwood? You guys done tore down Cottonwood. How come you don't put the housing facility on Cottonwood? Because they already got Kroger over there, they got Walgreens, they got Family Dollar, they got Petco, they can walk over there. How come you don't do that and just leave that alone? That's my other question, and I'm
We don't
done.
own Cottonwood. That's the Finneytown Schools owns Cottonwood. The township doesn't own Cottonwood. We have no interest in Cottonwood. It's all the
Well, how are you going to buy Whitaker then?
Huh?
You said you were going to buy
It's just part
Whitaker.
of the idea that if we get a good development, that maybe Whitaker would come available and we would purchase it. There's no plans to do that right now. That's just a concept.
And I
Okay,
think, I think it's important to stay focused
move
on
on.
the concepts. That's
Yes.
really important.
Yes, ma'am.
My name's Gina Shank, and I live on Somerset. I've done a lot of thinking, and I've talked to people, from this coming about, and I was one that did not know much. I knew way back, but not in 2011. But anyhow, we need to move forward on this. I think that you see a lot of people here with interest, that we realize that something's going to be developed there, that we need to be unified in a voice, and it'll help you decide what we feel is also best. I am 5 houses from Warder. That's, 100 yards, maybe? And, excuse me. So I feel that it's, very important to me. I've lived there over 30 years. I raised my kids there. And the area there by, of all the dead-end streets, Warder, Somerset, Parkview, Northern Parkway, and Bryn Mawr, they're all dead end. And all these years, it seems like they're a Mayberry neighborhood, that kids grow up, they come back for their first homes. Their parents still live there. There are many families who have multiple children, generations that live back there. So that says something to them. And, to have that still around is rare. And, so we need to, preserve that. Yes, we need to have our property value up. We've had foreclosures, so our area back there has been hit hard with that. So, you also have to look at that. But with all what you were saying, some of them were great ideas, but I cannot see how all that can fit in this space. And I really didn't see, even by the diagram, I'm sitting way in the back. My question is what's really being affected by all these dead-end streets of Warder, Somerset? I only see the orange off of Warder, but Somerset, Parkview, and Bryn Mawr, I didn't hear anything, so I don't know what's happening.
So I think the question is...
So that's my question.
Is it fair to say the question is not just what happens within the property, but what's the in the planning process, how do you take into account what happens to the streets, to the houses,
Right, and
to
our
the
streets are
community
very
that's around it?
narrow, and no sidewalks, so all that needs to take into account.
Okay, let's let them go.
Is it your feedback that you,
Can we pull his up?
is it your feedback that you would want to see more connection between the streets and the water site, or that you do not want to see connections made?
No, I don't want connections to it.
Okay.
I'm just afraid that, since we're right on the edge, that you're going to pack that, if you're going to say everything is your ideas, or it's going to be so compact that it definitely is going to come out of the perimeters. I mean, you can't fit all that in there. So it's going to be coming out, the traffic,
Well, I would like to point out that the traffic is this way, not connecting into these individual dead-end streets.
But
just
even
to be
like
fair.
the buildings and everything, I mean, I can't tell, by you talking, what was happening at that one whole side, and that was my main question. But then my main comment was that something's going to happen, and we need to be unified, and for us to be an important part of the decision.
Yeah, the drawing that you're looking at now, those are shaped bubbles. It's really sort of a bubble diagram. It doesn't mean that everything under that tan bubble is building area. It can't be. That's certainly not the idea we wanted to convey here tonight. It's just that that's a sort of a use area, whether it's a tree area or a pocket park or a building or a street, or we have to park cars. That is the area that's dedicated to that mix of uses. So those bubbles do not indicate buildings necessarily. We haven't gotten far enough to figure out where buildings will be. We just haven't.
This is what all early planning looks like. So let's go over here.
We will keep you guys informed as the process continues. We will have additional meetings to talk about where, as things become more readily clear, I guess you would
I
say.
would like to say one thing too and I think, Gina, part of the thing in looking at these buildings, and I was looking at those pictures too, and those are buildings from somewhere else. They're not from here or what they're proposing for here, but this is to be scaled. And one of the things which I know that we've talked about, and I certainly, as a member of this board, would respect, is that there is buffering between any use in Warder. There would be buffering, that would take into account the wishes of people who live around it, so that you're not going to have, if the township ever does this development, you're not going to have a brick wall up at the end of your street or in your backyard. If some private developer does it, that could be a different story. But the idea is we're trying to work something together, as you said, as a team, to try and have the best for everybody.
And I'd just like to add as well, the suggestions, the questions that you're raising, those are great questions, and the developers are taking notes as well, so that when we do have our next meeting, when there is another meeting, those questions can also continue to be addressed, and your feedback and your comments are so critical.
Yeah, they are being recorded over here.
Can we have our time? There's 10 people waiting to speak, so let's get on.
Hi, my name is Mark Besterman. I'm a 25-year resident of Timber Trail across from Whitaker. I strongly believe that we cannot leave Whitaker as it is. And I feel like I should be talking to the audience, not here, but I've walked Warder Nursery dozens and dozens of times. I've went there Saturday night to look around before knowing I would be coming here. There are a lot of unsafe conditions with drainage, holes in the ground. There are trash piles out there. No. Yes, there are. I saw them Saturday night. There are things that people are doing there that they shouldn't be doing. I think there are some residents that are dumping trash, dumping piles of leaves back there. I saw that. There are people that are burning fires back there. I saw a fire that had ashes in it that was still warm to my touch when I walked that area Saturday night. So things are going on in that area that really shouldn't be going on. So I don't think it can stay as is, unless as is means we put up a 20-foot fence and never allow anybody to go back there. We can't stay how it is. So I think we should do something. I think we should do it smartly. I think we should do it in a way that preserves some parkland, as they've suggested. I don't think we as a community should support 54 acres of parkland when it's going to cost a lot of money to develop it. And we do have very strong county parks, we have very strong township parks, we have very strong city parks that are all very close and nearby. So I understand the passion in this room, I really do. I applaud the effort of our officials up front and the developers to be at this meeting. It is a very, very tough thing for them to do. But as a resident, and a longtime resident of Finneytown, and somebody who has spent some time at Warder, I don't think it can stay as it is. I think we need to do something, and I think we need to have a plan that is the very best plan that we can come up with.
Okay, do you have any specific question?
So one question.
One quick one.
If something along those lines, along the lines of what's on the screen is done, how would you expect it to affect my property taxes? Would my taxes expected to go up, down, or stay about the same?
I think the anticipation is that they would go down. There would be, look, I know it may, I know, people say, oh, that never happens. Here's the problem with Springfield Township. We're a bedroom community. We have no industry. We don't have the commercial. We don't have some of the development that makes property taxes much lower. Look at your property values. Anybody get out their property values statement from the auditor's office and see if their property values went up or down. One of the reasons it's keeping our property levels down are the taxes that we pay. We pay those, you pay those to the township, you pay them to the school, you pay them to Hamilton County. Some new development in Springfield Township would bring in added revenue, which would, if it would not lower your taxes, it would at least not put the burden on the trustees to have to run levies where we say to the voters, we don't pass taxes. We put it on the ballot and say to the people, do you want them or not? That's the way township government works. I can't vote any tax in, but we ask the people if they want to. This development would, in the long run, it's not the main reason for it. The main reason is we think this will be a catalytic development, which will make our whole community better. But, or certainly that's one of the main reasons. But it's not for taxes, but I think in the end it will either lower or it will at least delay any increases.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'd like to go over here.
Good evening. Live on Timber Trail. My wife and I came here this evening thinking that this was a development or no development meeting. It seems like the decision has been made and we were just not aware of it. Is that correct? I have another question then, please.
I think that's what we got back. That's why I asked that. I tried to frame that question before,
Okay.
the same thing. So why don't you ask your next question?
Okay. The next question is, what is the general and financial purpose and benefit of this project? Is it for us residents? Is it for the developers? Or is it for someone else? Could you be a little enlightening on that, please?
I'll just say a few words. I think it's for the development and improvement of the community as a whole, Springfield Township as a whole. We know for a fact that it's been since the majority of our homes and our housing here were developed in around the 1970s. So most of our neighbors and our community folks are changing. Their lifestyles are changing. The housing stock has also changed over the years. So this is a way to improve the sustainability of the township, also to attract new families and new residents, and also to retain the residents that we have here. There are certain residents and a lot of residents in our community who want to stay here, but we don't have the housing stock that would meet their needs. So this is an opportunity for us to be able to attract and retain our community residents. As well, when you look at our township, we are right on 75, and we have Cross County that unites us with 75. There are a lot of people who are looking for diversity in in the communities, in the housing stock, and this would be an excellent opportunity to provide that for them. So it would be beneficial for Springfield Township as a whole and beneficial for businesses.
Your name, please?
Mary Patton. You hear me?
Yes.
Hear you.
Thanks, Mark.
I've been in Finneytown since 1966. I'm on my second home, and I want to stay here. To the St. Francis group, I didn't hear a thing about a detached patio home.
So her question was, she said she didn't hear a thing about a detached patio home. So is that a request, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. So this man here and his team will take that, and so that, I mean, I'm not trying to be glib, but that's exactly what this is about. I mean, we talked about market feasibility studies. We go to people who said, I've been here since 1966, I'm on my second home, I'd like it to be my third home, and I'd like it to have a patio. Okay, well, that's really good market feedback, and because what we want to do is we want to sell product. And so understanding what the market wants is really an important part of that process.
Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Doherty, and I live on Finney Trail at the far corner of the Woody area. My question has more to do with, I'm concerned about retaking that corner of Winton and North Bend. Are we working, or do we have something in the mix, should this move forward, working with our community neighbors, City of Cincinnati, and what that corner looks like? It sounds like this is going to be upscale. We don't need another cell phone store. We don't need another drive-through beer cave. We don't need, and I'm wondering, that's going on across the street, which is a higher crime area, the UDF and west of there. I'm just curious as to, maybe it's the township trustees, are you reaching out to City of Cincinnati? There's a lot of vacant business space there. It would concern me as to what are their plans, and who are they marketing to be our business neighbors should this go through?
I'll just make a brief comment, and Joe, you can say a few things too. We continually work with the business district. We work not only with the county, but at the state level as well. We're looking at what type of community businesses that we can bring into the community that would continue to improve the quality of life and sustainability of our community. But our community is a bedroom community, and so our income level is, what is it, about $120,000, I think, the average person, or a little bit less than that. So, those types of businesses, we don't want, not all of them, but still, we have no control. What is it, 70,000?
More like 70.
Our average income in this township is $70,000.
In that area.
In that broad scope, okay? So the businesses that are there, they are well utilized by our residents. And one of the things that I've said, and many of you have heard me say this, I'm always looking at how we can attract more upscale businesses, but it's the neighborhood that has to be able to support that type of business as well.
Also, just so you know, we do have a right of refusal if something is supposed to go in. I mean, we have control of the property. That's the difference between today and when the city was going to sell the property when we acquired it. So we're not going to put in a bunch of stuff that, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going to be there. They've got to do market studies and look at it, and we got to see who wants to come, all those things. But we're not going to put the same stores that are at Brentwood or the corner of Winton and North Bend, in there to, and duplicate what's already there.
Not to counter you, but to the point earlier that you are attempting to bring people to a unique experience. It would seem to me that in order to do that, that whole area would need to be included in that unique experience. So if you have this bedroom community with this great pocket of beehive of activity, as you're describing, it seems counter to have just across the street the cell phone store and the Ameristop and the criminal. Are we inviting that across the street to create criminal activity where we're at? Or are we in fact going to be able to work with City of Cincinnati and sort of push that or disperse that elsewhere? Because it's very concentrated there in that corner. And I was just wondering if if we're working closely with Cincinnati and College Hill and North College Hill, those kinds of communities, maybe as a whole, we can kind of figure out what is best to go here for all of those communities and invite, College Hill. And I know they have a project you mentioned, the College Hill Community, the council is working there. Elizabeth Sherwood, I believe.
Yes.
So if we're working closely with them to say what else can we put in these communities so that we're all visiting one another, then it's a much larger community and we're being friendly with our neighbors. But right now, my concern is that that's a high crime area for Cincinnati and the corner, and we're going to build something high end right across the street.
So you have just articulated a lot of good points in a master's thesis in urban planning around all of these things. I mean, you raise a lot of very good points, and a lot of those are more broad than we can tackle this evening. But I would say specifically, as it relates to the intersection you referenced and the project we're discussing this evening, the idea and what your trustees are trying to create is a virtuous circle where you have some prosperous development. Catalytic is the word that has been used several times. That catalyst makes the need for cell phone stores and check cashing places less prevalent. It makes them less likely to come here, which makes them less financeable, which again is a virtuous circle. If you don't have new investment in a community, what happens is that circle works the other way. Just like that, it works the other way. And the idea is to make sure that this community, what your trustees are trying to do, is have it spiral up and not spiral down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Jerry Green, and I've been a resident of Finneytown for 54 years. I worked for Finneytown Local School District 24 years. I had a couple questions that a lot of it has to do with our local school district. I see, where is Whitaker located on that map? Is it between the two orange? Okay, that's Whitaker Elementary School. Well, my question is, have you been in communication with Finneytown Local Schools in regards to Whitaker Elementary, which is butted up adjacent to that piece of property? Has anyone contacted Finneytown Schools and
Go ahead and I'll say something.
We've met with them. They have no plans yet. Their board is talking
we
about.
don't have any money to build a new school,
I know,
the last I heard.
It's the whole thing. So they're talking about state money, they're talking about running a levy. There's no plan. We talked to them about it, but they don't have a plan until they have a plan.
Right.
We can't incorporate it.
So,
we just showed it here because, just like the city's piece,
So
it's
our
there and it would work for us, but there's nothing, we've talked to the city as well, but there's nothing in concrete that we're purchasing it.
The last I heard, Finneytown didn't have the money to buy elementary schools. We are down on enrollment. Our enrollment is down, but to bring more children into this district, I don't know where we, quite frankly, put them. Whitaker is overcrowded, okay? And we don't have the money to buy a new school, and we need one desperately. So am I to believe that the construction project is going to enter at both sides of Whitaker School while we're teaching class? How are you going to get with all due respect, I'm trying to be respectful here. I just have questions. How are you going to get heavy machinery behind those buildings without entering Whitaker's property?
We have access on the southern part, that bottom part. We actually have access there. That is a township owns that leads back to water. On Winton Road. And we have a large access on North Bend Road.
If I could also mention, Jeff, the architect, he said that, I think his language was, we have to allow for the possibilities that might emerge in the future. And so everyone seems to have problems with that school. Either it's too crowded, or it's too old, or it's too chopped up, or whatever. All of the above.
All of the above. It's too crowded, it's too old.
So that's not, that's kind of over our pay grade, but we have to realize that other things are going to happen that are adjacent to this, and we have to allow for those possibilities. In the meantime,
How close do you
however,
plan on building up against Whitaker School? Because my classroom window is from here to that board, and I have pictures of deers roaming and romping, and some people say those are nuisance animals because they're deers, but they belong there. But what I'm saying is, how close do you plan on building to my classroom?
So the actual design is far from laid out, but I would say there are little improvements that as part of this process can be contemplated. For example, would it make sense to have a playground kind of back behind, or does it make sense to have it fronting on a very busy street
Well,
with
I've
48,000 cars?
I've heard that you
So-
guys have talked with, and this just might be hearsay because I just want to be informed. I heard that you might possibly buy the upper playground, which is a field we use for soccer and football and stuff. I heard that that may be purchased and that this plan might include building a playground behind Whitaker School. Is there any truth to that?
Jerry, we've talked to Finneytown schools. There is no plan. I mean, the plan is we've talked just so they could come up with a plan. This is the first thing we've come. We have not been in contracts. We've talked generally to the school board. We've talked generally to the city of Cincinnati. We really have nothing to do with Finneytown and what they're going to build. So, I mean, a question about
But
Finneytown
I really
school.
don't care
Let me
what's
finish.
going on in other spaces
Right.
in Springfield
We don't
Township. I'm
have-
right on the construction site where I work, you know.
We
I'm
don't
concerned.
have a plan for that. We do have access on both roads. That's all I can tell you. And that's, as far as Finneytown, there's nothing I can tell you about them. You'll have to go to the school board meeting and ask them about that.
I did.
Jerry, there has been discussions, there's been nothing decided. What this plan is looking at is Finneytown has a very, very difficult challenges ahead of them, as you well know. This site could be part of that solution. So at this point, it's purely exploratory. There's no final plans, there's no final decisions on anything, but those discussions are ongoing to figure out what can the township do, how can we work with the school district to solve their issue. They're complicated issues, and I don't want to get it too much more detail because it's just not known at this point.
I just would hope that you would bear in mind that bringing in a lot of new residents, a lot of new children into the community, we don't have the facility for that.
Well, I think that's the school system that has to deal with that. But as somebody who has a
No, it's us as residents that have to deal with that.
Well, I know that. But as someone who has a grandchild who's living in this district, who's 3 years old, and we're looking at that, I mean, yeah, the question about where the, how the district builds out. But I think what they're saying is that the structure of government, the school district is separate from the township.
I just want that to be considered.
Okay, I think that, I don't think there's any question about being considered.
I just want it to be considered.
I don't think there's any question about that. That's what
It's
they're
a
saying.
major in your communities
Okay,
above
I think we need to
construction.
move on.
I swear, just one time. Construction is really good maybe in your community, but Finneytown is a school district. That's all Finneytown is, 4 square mile school district. So I think that they need to highly be considered when they're building very close to it, because that's why people move here for the schools.
Okay, thank you. Over on this side.
Hi.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. No, I think there's been enough questions. I have a few things to say. The only reason we're here, and I am astounded at the number of people, we were hoping for 50. 300 people to show up for this. What does that say? Somebody dropped the ball somewhere. And Ms. McFarland, you were at and the administration, you were at our.
Yeah, do you have a question, please?
Okay. How many signatures does it take to stop this? We got 500 right here. Is 500 enough to shut this bad boy down? That's my question.
I'd like to say, Dan, yes, I was at the meeting on Denier, and I just want to say, I think the majority, a lot of people are here to get the facts, just to find out, also to squelch or understand some of the rumors that are floating around. And I think people, it appears to me that there seems to be an openness about wanting to know, okay, if there is going to be a plan, what is it going to include, and what input can we have to improve, to make the plan more unified with our Springfield Township community.
How about no plan?
We've already addressed that.
Yeah. Okay, let's
Thank
over
you.
this side.
All right, here's the word. This is how the petition states. 500 signatures in our community. This is what the petition says, if you don't mind. Springfield Township purchased Warder Nursery behind Whitaker Elementary at $720,000 for a park. not a commercial park.
Just read it.
A park.
Read it.
Now the proposal is to develop a green space for restaurants, offices, and housing. Many of us bought our homes because of this green space. The added congestion will devalue our property. We, the undersigned, are concerned citizens who urge Springfield Township to act now to stop the development of Warder Nursery. Who do I submit this to?
Thank you.
You can drop it off the office. 9-5.
Well, isn't there someone in this room I can give it to?
Well, we'll take
Are
it.
you ready to go anyway? Okay. Sir, over here, you want to state your name?
My name is Terry Judge. I live on Northern Parkway. And first thing, just a quick observation. I can't help it. I'm looking at that sheet and I think of Joni Mitchell. And they paved Paradise and put up a parking lot. And it's one damn expensive parking lot. And the one thing, I'm a frequent user of Warder, and actually just about every day, with the exception of a few, I love Warder. I've been here 28 years. I lost my wife 2 years ago. The only reason I stay here is I love Warder. There's a magic in Warder that you have to experience and be part of. And we're not selfish. We want to share that. I've been talking a lot with the Hamilton County Park System. Their definition of green space, and it's across the board, it's pretty much across the country, as I see it, is 80% wild, 20% developed. That's what green space is. You talk about how many green space there is in Springfield Township. I live in Finneytown. What counts to me is what green space is in Finneytown. We want to keep Warder wild because this is it for us. Once that green space is gone, you can't bring it back. And a lot of the people I talk to...
Do you have a question?
I do have a question. A lot of the people I talk to with preserves, and they got a lot of those preserves from gifting, and $1.2 million, that's a lot of money to me, but ultimately that's not a lot of money. You talk about the top 1-5%. A lot of people in Cincinnati, that could be gifted. You know, I don't know how much this project is going to cost, but it's going to be a whole lot more than $1.2 million. If you leave 80% basically undeveloped with some improvements and use 20%, like a lot of the preserves use, you're going to save a lot of money. You may be able to work out something with Hamilton County Park that they'll take it. You won't have to worry about maintenance or anything else. And my question is, has this been checked out in terms of gifting or any other way of keeping the park natural and keeping a green space in Finneytown? I do not want to lose, and I think most of us here, and one thing I got to add, I was part of the people that went and got petitions. I went down Northern Parkway. Every single house that I talked to signed a petition. Not a single person knew about this.
So is the question, has they looked into raising $1.2 million in private gifts?
Yeah, I know we got to move on, so that's the question, yeah.
Yeah, is that the question? Is the answer yes or no on that? That's a simple one.
We've not looked into raising $1.2 million to keep this wild for the reason.
I'll pledge $10,000 for one person if you want to start gifting.
The reason we have not considered that, as we've said before, is we have to look at the good of all the people, all 36,000 people in this township. And it's for that reason we think that there would be a lost opportunity cost for the entire community if we were to do that.
Have you considered the value, though, of the green space? People from other parts of Springfield Township, when they come to Warder, they are amazed at what we have there. There is something that can be of value to everybody in Springfield Township from Warder.
We're way after 9, and I think we need to keep people asking their questions. Sir?
My name is Matt Viola. I own a business in this community, and I own 9 parcels in Springfield Township. A lot of the people in this room I work for, I'm personal friends of. I just want to tell you, this is an awesome opportunity that you have to express your concerns. In the last 3 months, I've heard nothing but negative comments, and I didn't know what they were talking about because I didn't know what the plan was. Now you have an opportunity to give your opinion, and I think you should stay on the positive side instead of staying on the negative side. As far as being at these meetings, I'm not the greatest email guy in the world, but I was at the meetings. I saw the meetings. I went to the neighborhood meetings. I came here for my neighborhood. I was here personally. I do know they did express this concern. So there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of feelings, but I think we should keep it on the positive note and not on the negative side. And I want to thank you guys for this opportunity. And obviously, you'll know when the next meeting is, and you'll be able to give your positive concern instead of your
Do you have a
negative.
question?
I'm done.
You're done. Okay. Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Sue Connell. I am a Springfield Township resident who happens to also be a Finneytown resident. Comment is, I think that Springfield Township is a large and diverse area. I also think that Finneytown is a bedroom community, as we've all said. Springfield Township's tag, I believe, is a community of neighborhoods. I don't think it's fair to strap Springfield Township's woes on the back of Finneytown. I think there's many other opportunities for development and redevelopment in Springfield Township. We all drive past them all the time. I've heard a lot of buzzwords tonight. Iconic. Finneytown and Springfield Township are not iconic. They are neighborhoods. We live here because we have families. We live here because our children are safe here. We live here because we want to make a difference. Finneytown is not the best. It's not the worst, but we are here for a reason. And developing Warder, I am not opposed to looking at development. Clearly, we're all late to the table. We're sorry, but we'd like to be invited to the table repeatedly, and we'd like to be given more information and more opportunity to talk, not ask questions. My question is to Gwen McFarland. I was at your election meeting, meet the candidates. You were asked specifically what kind of fiscal things would happen in the community, what things were going to go forth and forward. You made no mention of Warder as a development or as a community asset or anything. It was totally off the table. And I'm curious as to why, if this has been going forward for so long, that wasn't shared at that meeting, because I surely would have been interested in it. And thank you. I'll wait for your answer.
Thank you, Sue. At that particular forum, it was a candidates forum, and the questions were raised, and I addressed those questions, and I did not raise it because it wasn't addressed.
Didn't know to ask it, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, over here, please.
Well, I'd just like to know, I pay taxes, and all of you have water, and not one water was offered us but some little skinny cookies. And I've been here a long time, and I've got cotton mouth, and I had to go back here in this bathroom to scoop up water. So all I ask is, the next meeting, would you please provide some doggone water?
Now, that's a question. There's a process question we can work with. Ma'am?
Okay. My name is Peg.
Okay, let's get back in order so people can be heard. Go ahead.
My name is Peg. I've lived in this community, around 3 decades. My husband's lived in this community about 5.5 decades. I want to thank the township for having this meeting tonight. I have been to your past meetings because of literature I did receive. So I thank you for this follow-up. And I ask that the residents really be open to some kind of ideal. Developments like this are being used nationally, and they are used to help revitalize communities. And if you haven't looked around, our community is indeed in need of revitalization. Now, that doesn't mean you wipe out 54 acres of green space, but it can be developed in a productive way that's beneficial to our community, as well as the residents wanting to keep a buffer in green space. And also, I do encourage you to keep your conversations with the school. I did attend the school board meeting. Our schools are in dire need, and if this is a way for us to get together with our schools to help keep our taxes down, because they are going to be coming to us because the buildings are falling apart. And so please keep that in mind as you go forward as the ways that maybe we can jointly use our resources. That's it. Thank you.
Over here.
Hi, my name is Gary Friedensberg. I live at Bridge Creek condominiums. I just wanted to mention they're part of Springfield Township. There are probably 100 new condominiums being built as we speak. They are in the process of doing that. My question is, how much evaluation has there been done? Since that wasn't mentioned at all, it's like there's no new building in Springfield Township, and that's not true.
Very little
And that's, honestly, this is the extent of the design development that you've seen, that and Jeff's bubbles. And when you do the market research, you need to be a little more specific. So you give them some pictures, and you give them some price points, and you give them some design details, and then you get things input like I want a patio, and then you do some quantitative research and some qualitative focus grouping to try to get out what the market needs. So the
So
answer,
you haven't done any research to
no, sir.
say this is why you're putting this in? Like commercial, there's all kinds of empty commercial buildings around, so I'm sure that you have to look at that as well.
So
when
it's
you're
it's kind of like the scientific method, right? Here's our hypothesis. Now we're going to prove or disprove the hypothesis, and then we'll come up with a different hypothesis until we find one that the market will reward and that fits in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir.
Good evening, my name is Bob Trenkamp. I've been a township resident for over 50 years, and I also own and operate a business in township and have for a lot of years. And I'm here because I care about the township. You see me at other meetings. I care about the economic health of the township. And I applaud the township for being proactive on this development because I think I like a lot of what I see here tonight. I may be in a minority here, but I think, again, I look out for the entire township and the economic health. With that said, I've heard a lot of legitimate concerns about drainage, concerns about traffic, concerns about environmental. And I think those can be mitigated with the right development team. So I encourage the residents to continue to work with this team to mitigate and to address those concerns.
Thank you. Sir?
My name is George Mahan, live on Greenfields Lane. Been in Springfield Township about 55 years. I've built over 300 homes. I have a real estate license. Two questions that I can see is going to be impossible to improve is the infrastructures that you've got there. How many bathrooms, how many parking spots is this going to take? Because we have a very serious sewer problem on storm sewer and sanitary sewers in this area. We're about to have a water problem. To create this much more cars and people using facilities, it's not going to be allowed by the way the EPA and their runoff, those two ponds, they're going to control what you're going to do with that water. You know that. And just to say you've got a design, where is the market that you have proved that this is necessary? What have you sold to any developer to put office buildings or commercial buildings in there? Where is the demand on that market?
Well, I think the conceptual idea, obviously, as Mr. Nyer had illustrated, is that we would come up with a conceptual plan, take that to market, and see if their hypothesis, in fact, would be proved out. Going back to your original question regarding the sanitary issues and then the stormwater issues, which I think we've addressed fairly comprehensively tonight. The sanitary issues, we've already met with MSD regarding the potential development of this property, and they've already indicated that the sewer credits is what they call in terms of if you're going to do a development, how many sewer credits would that development take, and then what is their capacity? They've already indicated that there is capacity to develop this property. MSD has. Additionally, regarding the storm sewer issues, those are all proved out in the Hamilton County Public Works Department. They require that anytime any piece of property is developed, that the stormwater generated from that particular piece of property stays on that property and cannot adversely impact properties on the peripheral. So that is actually a building code requirement, and I think Ted Hubbard, who's our county engineer, would attest to that. Regarding, again, going back to the conceptual issues, and would it prove out in the market? I think that's yet to be seen, and that's probably step 2 or 3 from where we are today. So additional meetings, I think we'll be able to bring back and say what the market will prove to be viable or not. And Tom, I don't know if you want to add to that, but I think that's pretty much where we are today.
No, I mean, I appreciate your experience, sir, and you're right. I mean, we have some general ideas and based on intuition and feedback and market observation as to what is going to work, and we believe, and we told the trustees that we believe there is a high-quality catalytic opportunity here. Exactly what the mix is of what uses and the details of the design and how the roads go and how the environmental issues are properly addressed are all very important. We just don't know yet.
Yes, but you're going to continue to exercise this development, but you don't know where the market is going to be, you're not going to put your money into building all these buildings, right?
Yes, sir. Empty buildings don't do me any good. They don't do you
That's
any good.
correct.
That's
Or
right.
the township, they don't do any good. We've got empty
bet.
buildings now. As far as the sewer system, on the street that I live in, the sewer is backed up twice. That's the sanitary sewer in the street. As a matter of fact, since the Metropolitan Sewer Department says now they're not going to pay for any repairs that water would back up from the street sewer into your home. That's up to you and your insurance company now. So they're not going to fund any more money to do it. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Sir, what I'd like to do, after the meeting, I'd like to get your information, and I'd be more than happy to discuss your issues with MSD personally and see what we can figure out to resolve the issue on your particular street.
Thank you. Ma'am?
My name's Robin Hendley. I live in Ridgefield Drive in South Finneytown. I moved here in October of 1999, and I don't make all the township meetings, but I don't miss many. And I can look around this room tonight and tell you with utmost certainty, 90% of the people in this room, I've never seen you at a meeting. Never. As far as communication, I've lived in 21 different communities in my lifetime. I'm 60. I've never lived anywhere where I've gotten more information from where I've lived without having to ask for it. It's on the website. It's in your mailbox. So I would suggest, when you're not busy, or have dinner early, show up at some of the meetings, because the very first meeting I went to was November of 1999, and it was on a Tuesday night. And Warder Nursery was on the agenda. Because I remember when I introduced myself to the trustees, it was Gwen that I asked about it. What's Warder Nursery all about? So anybody that's standing in this room that said they didn't know, you must have been asleep, and I apologize if that sounds insulting. In terms of one of those people that moved here and liked it, wants to stay, I'm with Mary Patton. So when you go to look at the development for the residential areas, I'm 2 years and 6 months and about 32 days maybe or something like that from retiring. I want a 2-bedroom patio home, small basement, lots of closets, covered garage, preferably next to Mary. We'll share a driveway. Because I'm one of those people that when I retire, if I can't find a place to live that fits a changing lifestyle, I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to move away because I don't have any option. I bought a house that was a rental. I've rehabbed it. It's very nice. It would be wonderful for a new family.
Thank you for the input.
Thank you.
Seriously, thank you.
So I would say just keep everybody posted. And for those of you that are concerned in the environmental, I can assure you that the private developer is not going to put in the streets. He's not going to put in the water lines, and he's not going to put in the sewers. That's the public sector's job. And when you put public tax dollars in infrastructure, they will do a very vigorous overview of the environment, and they'll do an assessment. And any adverse impacts have to be mitigated, or that money won't go into that infrastructure. The rules have stayed the same?
Only getting more stringent. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
I was in it 20 years ago, and I didn't expect it would have gotten any better. So, thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
I came up here just to put, I hope, a positive spin on this. I think you four folks that we elected, and I know you all, and where was Mike over there, you guys do a fantastic job, and what was presented here is the results of your doing a fantastic job, period. All of the people around here are understandably selfish because they live near to this property and they've been walking on it. But I represent the 36,000 people in the township who says, you guys keep on doing what's right for the township, period.
Thank you. I think this could be our last comment or no. We've got somebody else. Okay. So, yes, ma'am.
My name's Tricia Herbers. I live on, I'm getting nervous. I live on Springbrook Drive in Finneytown in Springfield Township. I came here because I know people who use Warder Nursery much, much more than I do. I wanted to know what was going on. I didn't know. Only thing I heard about in 2000 earlier was Winton Road Corridor and that development, which is gorgeous, all right? About this, I hear iconic, I hear catalyst, and then I saw the pictures and I thought they're doing this everywhere. This is not iconic, this is not a catalyst, and this is not Finneytown. and it's not really Springfield Township. I grew up in Pleasant Run Farms. So I've been a Springfield Township resident most of my life, since I was 4, most of my life. I'm more making a comment, because I hear you're taking those too tonight, than having a specific question. Iconic, to me, would be somehow more that this would be a nature preserve within our township, within the city, because it is different than what we've got. I'd have agreed with comments from both sides. But what I'm seeing here is a path to St. X High School, which all my children attended. And I'm seeing a potential for something that is a big idea to be a big fail, because it's overstepping. It just doesn't seem to fit with where we are, where the township is, where the neighborhood is. And like I've heard, there are tons and tons of empty buildings, and we don't need more. Much rather have empty green space.
Okay, now I think we have the last question.
I'm Dave Hassler. I live over by St. X High School. I'm an engineer. I've done 50 of these programs in my lifetime. A couple of concerns I see. I don't see anything that has addressed the traffic on Galbraith, Winton, or North Bend. I see more traffic being developed into those things. So who's looking at the big picture of the main avenues around the facility? And I would really like to thank Jeff here, and I think you should meet with me and the school board and listen to some of their plans, because Finneytown is getting a lot of push to add all-day kindergarten and pre-kindergarten programs, and the only spot that I think that is large enough to develop is behind the existing Whitaker. If you're thinking about taking more space away, get together with the school board, invite me, and I just want to talk with them about that. That piece there will be key to the survival of the Finneytown school districts. Otherwise, we're going to continue losing. So, again, I think the only place for development and an additional campus, if necessary, is right behind Whitaker. So I would just ask you to meet with the school board, and again, I work with them some on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just real quick question. What is the next?
Get up so people can hear you. It's not worth it if.
My name's John Stadd. I've been here since I was born. Mr. Hurley, I think, was one of my professors. What is the next step, and when can we expect to hear what that is?
Perfectly teed up.
Yes, yes.
Who wants to take that?
So there's been a lot of really very important feedback from people who are in favor of the development and people who are opposed to it. And so all the feedback, whether you are a supporter or an opponent, is important and has been recorded in lots of ways and by lots of people. So the next thing we have to do is to digest it. What I can tell you from a fair amount of experience is that a 400-person planning committee is not an efficient mechanism by which anything useful takes place. So what I would suggest, and this is certainly up to our clients and the trustees to think about, is what a solid working group is. And this is a mechanism that we've used in other communities to put together a solid working group that can provide input in a useful manner. And then we come back to another 400-person meeting and we share what those are, and that gives an iterative back and forth process. So that would be my suggestion. I am sure that Mike and Chris and the trustees will be in communication by whatever message to report some specifics on those next steps. But structurally, that would be my recommendation to them.
Tom, Sean, I think generally we were thinking somewhere 4 months, probably March, April, May timeframe. And that's what we said in the beginning on the next step, is that generally they'll take that information. The board will have to decide on what they want to do with the steering committee. I might add that the comprehensive neighborhood steering committee still meets. So it is not 70. I think it's probably close to 30, 40, somewhere in that neighborhood. So they do continually meet on an annual basis. We're going to be updating this plan, so we'll get with you on ideas like that, but another meeting like this probably in the spring, around April, May. They were on it for about a year. Yeah, they've been on it since back in 2011. 2011. That's a decision the board will have to make, taking a look at that steering committee. Where can you do what? Just communicate through us.
Yeah, here's what I
For the
think.
trustee meetings.
I think it's late, but you look around the room, look at all the people who have stayed with this. Thank you very much. What's your name? Mark up here needs to be called out because all night he's been helping make sure that the people who came up to this mic, tall, short, whatever, could talk clearly. Thank you. And the point is, 36,000 people, yes, but we're still a relatively small community. These people are accessible. These are not distant people. Both staff and elected officials can be gotten to, can be emailed, can be called, can be met with. So, that's our point, and I think the communication's here, and let's keep it going.